If you've ever wanted fast compost without the stink, the flies, or the endless turning, you're in the right place. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to Evergreen Garden and drop a comment below, because this method saves time, keeps neighbours happy, and works in real gardens, not theory. This is the 3-week compost system that stays odour-free, doesn't need turning, and actually finishes fast when done correctly. This compost works because biology does the heavy lifting, not muscle. Traditional compost fails for most gardeners because it's either too wet, too nitrogen heavy, or starved of oxygen. That's when smells start and flies show up. The method you're about to learn controls moisture, balances carbon and nitrogen from day one, and locks oxygen inside the pile so microbes stay aerobic. Aerobic microbes are the difference between sweet, earthy compost and a rotting mess. Why this compost finishes in 3 weeks without turning comes down to controlled layering and particle size. Instead of mixing everything and hoping for the best, this system builds a stable internal structure that heats evenly and stays active. The pile heats to between 55 and 65 degrees Celsius within the first 4 days, and stays there long enough to break down material fast while killing weed seeds and pathogens. Because the pile never collapses, oxygen remains available and turning becomes unnecessary. The correct carbon to nitrogen ratio is the backbone of this system, and it must be respected. You are aiming for roughly 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen by volume. Carbon materials include dry leaves, shredded cardboard, straw, sawdust from untreated wood, and dry grass. Nitrogen materials include kitchen scraps, fresh grass clippings, manure from herbivores, green weeds, and coffee grounds. For a practical example, if you add 1 bucket of kitchen scraps and fresh grass combined, you must add 3 buckets of dry leaves or shredded cardboard to balance it. How you prepare materials determines success before the pile even starts. Carbon materials must be dry and shredded to increase surface area. Large cardboard pieces slow the process, so tearing or shredding them matters. Nitrogen materials should be fresh, but not dripping wet. If kitchen scraps are watery, let them drain before adding. This preparation alone eliminates 90% of smell problems gardeners complain about. Building the pile. The right way locks in oxygen without turning. Start with a thick base layer of coarse carbon material about 15 centimeters deep. This can be small sticks, coarse straw, or rough wood chips. This base acts as an air reservoir. On top of that, add a nitrogen layer about 5 to 8 centimeters thick. Cover it immediately with a carbon layer 3 times thicker than the nitrogen layer. Repeat this pattern until the pile is at least 1 meter high and 1 meter wide. Size matters because small piles lose heat too fast. Moisture control is what keeps flies and smells away entirely. Each layer should be moist like a wrung-out sponge, never wet. If you squeeze a handful and water drips out, it's too wet. If it crumbles dry, it's too dry. When adding kitchen scraps, always bury them fully under carbon. Exposed nitrogen attracts flies instantly, while buried nitrogen disappears into microbial activity within hours. So why doesn't this compost smell, even in hot weather? Well, it really comes down to oxygen and having enough carbon coverage. You see, anaerobic conditions are what create those unpleasant sulfur smells. This system actually prevents those anaerobic pockets by maintaining proper structure and balance. If you get it right, by day 5, the compost should smell just like damp forest soil. But if you catch a whiff of ammonia, that means you've added too much nitrogen. To fix it, just add double the amount of dry carbon on top and give it a light watering to rehydrate the microbes. Now let's talk about heat management. You don't need to turn the pile. Instead, it's all about insulation, not movement. Once your pile is built, you want to cover it with something breathable like burlap sacks, old cloth, or even cardboard with a layer of straw on top. This traps the heat inside while still allowing gas to escape. Just remember, plastic should never touch the pile directly, because it'll suffocate the microbes and trap too much moisture. With the right cover, the internal heat stays steady, and the breakdown process actually speeds up, all on its own. So what's happening over those 3 weeks? Well, in the first week, bacteria are in charge, and the temperature rises quickly. Sugars and proteins are the first to break down. Then, in the second week, fungi and actinomycetes step in, starting to digest tougher carbon materials like cardboard and straw. By the third week, the pile begins to cool a bit, which tells us that most of the easy-to-digest material is gone and the compost is almost finished. At this point, the material will be dark, crumbly, and have that lovely earthy smell. So, how do you actually tell if your compost is finished enough to use after, say, 3 weeks? Well, honestly, it depends on what you're planning to use it for. If you're adding it to garden beds, you'll know it's ready when the original materials are no longer recognizable, except perhaps for a few small woody bits here and there. Now, if you're making potting mixes, it's best to let the compost cure for another 1 to 2 weeks, just to help stabilize those nutrients. And here's a really simple test. Just grab a handful and give it a good sniff. If it smells like soil and not waste, then yes, it's ready to go. This method scales easily for small and large gardens. For a balcony setup, you'll want to use a container that's at least 60 liters in volume, and well, just follow the same ratios. For farms or large gardens, simply build multiple piles, side by side, so you've got enough mass. The biology remains the same, regardless of scale, as long as you maintain balance and moisture. Mistakes that ruin this system are actually quite easy to avoid once you know them. Adding food scraps without carbon, for example, causes flies. Compressing the pile removes oxygen. Overwatering suffocates microbes. Ignoring pile size prevents heating. Every problem has a simple fix, and honestly, none require turning if the foundation is correct. This 3-week compost method isn't a shortcut. It's an efficient biological system that works because it respects microbial needs. Once you use it, slow, smelly compost really does become a thing of the past. If this guide helped you, subscribe to Evergreen Garden for more serious, practical gardening knowledge. Share this video with a fellow gardener who's tired of compost problems, and leave a comment with your results or questions so we can keep growing better soil together.